Welcome back. Now, in June 2022, CRAN officially launched the National SIM Registration Consumer Awareness Campaign to educate the public on the importance of the registration of SIM cards in Namibia. The SIM card registration is a process in which a mobile network operator or government regulatory authority collects and verifies information about individuals who own or use SIM cards in their mobile devices. This is a process primarily aimed at enhancing security, reducing criminal activities, and ensuring that mobile services are used responsibly. Joining us with more details on the progress that the campaign has made is Emilia Nghikembua, who is the Chief Executive Officer at CRAN. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to GMN.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, let's get right into it. We did say in our introduction that this campaign was launched in June last year and it's been ongoing. How has the registration process been thus far?
Okay, so from June last year, we have allowed what we call voluntary registration, which means that the compulsory provisions of the law were not yet enabled. So that took place between June 2022 up to December 2022. And then from the 1st of January 2023, we have then commenced with what we call mandatory registration, which means that there is a legal obligation upon every subscriber to a telecommunications network that utilizes a SIM card to have that SIM card registered with their service provider. And we have also set up an industry monitoring committee, which this is a committee made up of the regulator, but also of representatives from service providers that then come together to monitor the progress. And the report as at 30 September this year is showing that so far we have only attained 33% of registration, which means there is still about 1.8 million SIM cards that have not been registered.
Okay. Now, if you have only attained 33% or approximately, and that there is 1.8 million outstanding, in our introduction we did highlight that this process is primarily aimed at enhancing security, reducing criminal activities, and ensuring that mobile services are used responsibly. Perhaps, is there a link as of to why you're not getting the numbers that you are getting, even though besides indicating what this primary objective of this voluntary and what compulsory registration is aimed at?
Mm-hmm. The feedback that we have received from the service providers through our monitoring exercise is primarily that, number one, there was a reluctance from local authorities to make available spaces to set up registration points. And we have engaged the regional governors as well as the chief regional officers to just expedite the allowance of space for registration. Then the second one was power disruptions, especially in the remote areas when the registration points go out, because the system, the registration system is digitized, and if there is interruptions in power, then they cannot effectively complete the registration process. The other one that we have also received from the operators is that there is generally just a slow uptake from the public as far as the registration is concerned. But what has also been coming through from members of the public is that the distances, given the vast topology of our country, some people live in very remote areas and would require funding to be able to reach the registration points, a lot of which would then be in your towns or in the urban centers. So I think in a nutshell, those are really some of the hindrances that we have noted.
It's good that you highlighted the issue of registration points, because in the insert that we played prior to our discussion, highlights of the issues of that, for instance, people who are living in the nation's capital have to travel long distances, for instance, to come from Kadutura to simply just go attempt to register in town. Is there nothing that can be done to possibly reduce that burden also on the person that would want them to register and to be compliant as a law-abiding citizen?
Mm-hmm. The feedback that we are getting from the operators is that they have started to expand their registration capabilities Some of them are even recruiting additional staff just to make sure that they expand the registration points. So that is also work in progress in just ensuring that the citizens really have ample opportunities and platforms to be able to do their registration.
Now, there has been complaints from the public, general public, especially regarding their privacy and so forth. What are the potential security and privacy concerns that are associated with this SIM card registration? Are there areas for prone abuse?
No, there is definitely no areas for abuse, simply because there is a law that sets out how the registration must be carried out. And then equally, there is a law that sets out how the information must be kept. And if it is to be retrieved, let's say for investigation purposes by law enforcement agencies, then there is equally a process that sets out how that information must be retrieved, which primarily includes the request of a warrant through a court or a magistrate, and that process is then really crafted to ensure that citizens' rights are protected.
What about the issue of journalists who say they are in fear of possibly their sources, for instance, being leaked or probably being exposed by this issue of compulsory registration, as the process of voluntary registration has already lapsed, and now we are in the stage whereby it's either you get registered or your SIM card simply becomes deregistered when the time lapses?
You see, once again, there is a very airtight framework that enables the protection of citizens' rights. And we understand that the right to privacy is protected as per Article 13 of the Namibian Constitution. And this is why the entire process and the entire framework is crafted in such a way that the only time that operators would reveal the identity of a SIM card is if there is a judicial process that is enabled and empowered by the criminal procedural laws of Namibia. And if that becomes the case, then once again, they need to follow due process in terms of going to a court and applying to get a warrant so that the identity is then released. And I also want to say that the information that will be stored is not new information, because it's the numbers that you have called, for instance, the time of call and all of that. And that is information that is already stored. The only new thing that this process introduces is that now we know the identity of the person that is holding the card. I also want to say that there's been a lot of misinformation around would the service providers be storing the actual conversation. So even as I'm speaking to you now, the only thing that my service provider will be able to say is, yes, on this day at 6:30, a number from the NBC called Emilia, but what we spoke about, they don't have the capabilities or at least the level of the network penetrations that have been authorized as per the licenses do not allow for that capability to be able to record conversations, and you would need trillions and trillions of data space in any case to be able to store all of that. So that is not the level of network penetration that we have authorized, and that was also done to ensure that the privacy of citizens is guaranteed and is protected.
Now, as per your statement earlier, you did indicate that the registration process will lapse in December this year. What happens to those who don't do the right thing by registering?
Okay, so come 31 December, if you have not registered your card, it will be disconnected. And from the 1st of January until then, the 31st of March 2023, which means it's a period of 3 months, you still have an option to go to your service provider, provide your information, and then your number will be reactivated. However, if you don't reactivate it within that period of 3 months, then you will completely lose it. And if you still want to continue using the services, you will then need to go and buy a different number and then have that registered so that you can become connected again.
I take it you meant between the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of March 2024 and not 2023. Now,
yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Take us through the challenges experienced on this SIM card registration campaign and how you are making sure that you're dealing with all these challenges that you are picking up, besides the misinformation, talking about the incapability that service providers have not yet been given, for instance, to be able to store data and to record conversations. Besides those, what are some of the other challenges?
I think some of the other challenges is generally just slow uptake from the public. Like I mentioned earlier, it's only 33% of the SIM cards that have been registered. And what we've been doing together with the operators is also just enhancing our awareness creation, engaging the local authorities, engaging the governance officers, just to ensure that we disseminate the information and really educate the public about what are the requirements, the deadline, and of course also the benefits. And the other one, I think, has been the limited registration points, and this we have also engaged the operators, and some of them have actively started putting in place mechanisms just to expand those and ensure that they have adequate personnel to assist with the registration process.
Okay. Now, take us, for those that might be watching and perhaps are thinking of going to do the right thing and registering their SIM card, because we're having this conversation with the CEO of CRAN, what would be the process of the registration if they decide perhaps that I'm going to do the registration today, between today and the 31st of December 2023?
The registration is fairly simple. Take your ID, go to your service provider, complete the form, and be registered. It's a very fairly simple process.
Okay. Is there any possibility of extending this registration process? Because, I mean, you said 1.8 million. We could possibly see perhaps 1.8 million cards being deactivated on the 31st of December 2023, while people are preparing for the 1st of January 2024, which is New Year celebration.
You see, I want to clarify that the registration of SIM cards is done in terms of a regulation that was passed under the Communications Act by the Minister of Information and Communication Technology. Now, the registration period of the 12 months, which is what lapses on 31 December 2023, is also contained in those regulations that were passed by the Minister. Now, the role of CRAN is to simply educate the public about the content of this regulation, including the cutoff period, and then also ensure monitoring and compliance as far as the operators are concerned, to ensure that operators are then only registering and complying to the license conditions and the regulations that have been imposed. So the power to grant the extension does not lie with CRAN, but it lies with the Minister of ICT. Now, we have had engagement with the ministry where we have flagged the level of registration, the challenges, and where we are. And the ministry had issued a media statement or a public statement informing the public earlier in September that at that point there would be no extension granted, and that the public was then urged to go out and really ensure that their SIM cards have been registered. However, we are in talks with the ministry and we continue to update them on the progress that is being made. And if there is to be an extension, then this would have to come from the ministry, because the regulations and the law only empower the ministry to grant the extension and not CRAN. But because we are the liaison between the operators and the consumers, we are on a continuous basis engaging the ministry to bring them up to speed with what is actually happening on the ground. And we will continue to do that and to also give the necessary feedback and the necessary advice and guidance.
Now, before we start to wrap up our conversation this morning, what happens if I have renewed my SIM card already before the registration process?
You still need to register your card. You still need to register And obviously, we are also picking up that there is a lot of people, especially those who are on postpaid or those who have contracts with the service providers. For some of those, because when you took out the contract, you already had to give your address, your ID, and all of this. So for some of those, you are effectively already registered. But if you are not sure, it's always best to go to your service provider and just make sure that they have really ticked that off, that as far as that number is concerned, you are then registered, and not be under the pretext that you may be registered and then face the risk of being cut off.
Okay. Is there anything that we might have left out this morning before we let you go, ma'am?
Yes, I think the last thing that I wanted to just touch on quickly is the whole biometrics issue, because I think that had also become an issue at some point throughout this process. And we have issued a directive to all the operators that there shall be no mandatory capturing of biometric data. And we know that there were statements that were issued that would have created a perception that perhaps some of the operators would not be complying with that. But notwithstanding that, we have conducted a monitoring and compliance exercise, and our monitoring and compliance exercise has revealed that all the operators have at all times complied with that directive that was issued, and the only time that you would be requested to do biometrics is if you as a consumer voluntarily choose to have your biometrics captured. But if you do not want to do that, the operators still have a platform where you can simply submit your information and have your card registered.
Okay. No, I think that's clear to indicate that the citizens are not required to give their biometric information at this point in time, as it is not law. Okay. Well, Madam Emilia, thank you very much for making time to speak to us this morning, and we hope that we get more Namibians registered before the 31st of December 2023.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, our pleasure. Now, that was Emilia Nghikembua, who is the Chief Executive Officer of CRAN. They're talking to us about the voluntary card registration and also the mandatory card registration that has taken effect since the 1st of January 2023, and it ends on the 31st of December 2023, and also highlighting that only 33% card registration have taken place so far, and approximately 1.8 million card registrations are yet to be completed, and indicating that it ends on the 31st of December 2023, and that by the 1st of January 2024, if you're not registered, your card will literally be deactivated by midnight on the 31st of December 2023, and also again giving you time frame between the 1st of January 2024 until the 31st of March 2024 to renew your card. And definitely indicating that there's still some time before for you to complete that process. Now stay tuned. GMN gets returned shortly